I want to talk to Kelly in California. And Kelly says he wants to talk about how to eliminate God from the gaps in our knowledge. You're on the air with Objectively Dan, and is it Donnie J? Is that what you called me earlier, or somebody called me earlier?
I didn't call you Donnie J. One of the crew members called you Donnie J.
Donnie J.
That's going to be my nickname for you in my mind for now. I'm probably going to change my contact name in my phone for you.
Go ahead. You're on the line with Donnie J and Subjectively Don as well. Tell us what you're talking about, Kelly. I want to know, like, flesh it out a little bit, because we were talking about this before the show. We're trying to figure out exactly what you meant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I've been watching Objectively Dawn for a long time, so great honor to be here.
Yay! I'm glad you like me.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Objectively Dawn.
Got it.
So,
got it.
What I mean by that is this isn't necessarily just a religious issue. Like, for instance, astrologers are guilty of the God of the gaps, but without a God. And so I think that there is a problem with not just Christianity, but the religious framework that creates a God of the gaps mentality. And so I don't think it's sufficient to take an atheist position and then assume that we're going to be logical, assume that we're not going to have leftover remnants of religious thinking. So how do we eliminate that?
Kelly, I called it. I knew that's what you were talking about. And how do we do it? Well, Don's response, Subjectively Don, not Jay, his response, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Well, you just kind of do it. It's a process, and you just do it. But let me back up, because SD over here is going to have something to say about it.
Oh my God.
SD.
This is going too far. For those of you listening at home now, they have now changed our names on screen as Subjectively Don and Donnie J. So I feel like I'm part of a morning zoo crew,
exactly,
like bullshit radio show.
But Kelly, you're right. You're absolutely right. I've referred to this on The Nonprofits, another premier production of the ACA, which will be airing right after this show at 3 p.m. Central. I talk about it being the legacy of religion. And I've had conversations with friends of mine in the atheist community who are running into non-religious subject matters where people are still adhering to more old-fashioned, more traditional notions of sex, gender, economics, whatever you might want to say, and without having necessarily a basis in, let's say, skepticism or science or math or anything like that. And because those ideas don't necessarily get critically analyzed as you separate yourself from a metaphysical belief in, spirit beings, the notion that there are unquestionably two genders, because that's what they learned from an early age, but they're not remembering that what they learned from an early age was also that there's a kingdom in heaven and that there's a punishment and all these other things. And that a lot of the foundations for their beliefs and their worldview is based in this book that they no longer adhere to. And so you're right. You have to kind of do an audit. It's part of the process. We had somebody call Talk Heathen maybe a month ago or so. And he's like, what do I do now that I no longer believe? Well, you've taken a big step, and you've made some amazing progress, recognizing that you no longer believe in some metaphysical claim. But now the big work begins. How do you find meaning in your life? Where are your morality? What is your morality? What are your morality? What are next in your life? It's up to you to take that on. You can't just ride the coattails of whatever your parents told you. I mean, to some degree you can, because you see them being those good people in the world, but you can't just take it for granted that everything that they did was right because it was in a book and they had one reason. You got to find your own reason for doing those things or for doing different things. So, yeah, that's something that the atheist community is pretty lousy at still. I think on these shows, we're trying to highlight those things, highlight those other issues that aren't just, do you believe in Yahweh or Muhammad or whoever, Thor, but Also, what does that mean? What does that mean for how you treat people? What does that mean for how you view people? That's an ongoing journey that everyone has to take. Dan?
Yeah, so I think I interpreted this question as, what do we do on like a societal level to like change that, right? That's kind of what was that kind of what you were asking there, Kelly, about like as like a world community?
Well, that too. I mean, but partly because of the way we as individuals talk at a large level of influence about these things, because I think there's a problem with the way we identify what even constitutes a God of the gaps concept. Like something as pedestrian as everything is possible is a God of the gaps situation.
Yeah. Well, it's also like the thing with religion is it's just as much of a cultural force as it is, anything else. So like if you went back in time and you told the early followers of Jesus Christ that half of the people that believe in that religion today also believe that they could evolve from, apes several million years ago, right? They would say, well, that's crazy. That's not part of our beliefs. We have very different ideas about that. But like a lot of Christians today are totally fine with that and are totally okay with like evolution being a part of their religious practices. So like a religion that adapts and changes to new understandings of science is going to last longer and have that same level of influence than one that's not as flexible or as inflexible of those beliefs. That's why you see today the most inflexible of those religious beliefs are often the smallest religious communities out there, at least in the United States. Worldwide, that's going to be different in different areas. But it's just informed as religious beliefs can be as just informed in science as anything else if you're willing to kind of mesh those things together. It's what you see in a lot of progressive Christian movements now, who are trying to take new lenses to their Christianity and apply it so that they can have a coherent worldview that makes sense. But obviously with my position on that is that's going to fall apart at the end of the day, because there's going to be some things that you really just can't reconcile. But I don't know if other people would ever get to that point. It takes a lot of thinking and it takes a lot of working out beliefs that people may not have had a lot of time to really think about. And if we continue to live in a world where most people are working just to get by, who just like take their religious belief as something that gives them a sense of self and a sense of purpose in their community, then that's probably not going to change for a while. But for the rest of us that actually have the privilege to be able to think about this stuff and have conversations about it, then yeah, we might be a little more skeptical to that. So I don't know. I guess all that to say, it maybe wealth inequality plays a part of it too. There is a reason why there's a lot more people who are skeptical in nature or who are atheist in nature tend to be on the higher level of income, at least here in the United States and in other places too. I do think that plays a part as well. But I don't know.
Something that popped into my head was the notion that everything happens for a reason. Some terrible tragedy happens in your life, or you'll lose out on the big thing that you wanted. And that phrase, well, there's a plan, right? Or, I think religious people might say there's a plan. God's got a plan for you. Mm-hmm. As you separate from religion, people still say, and they don't mention God in this, everything happens for a reason. Now, on the one hand, you can say everything happens for a reason because it's planned that there's a greater good. But you can also turn that and say everything happens for a reason in the sense that there's an explanation for why this happened. And sometimes there's just no good outcome for you on something. Sometimes the stakes are a little higher because there's no safety net for you. And there is no meaning for a tragedy. A hurricane hits a town, a flood like the ones that are happening in Europe right now with people dead. Buildings collapse. Sure, there may be negligence, maybe somewhere in there, but truth be told, negligence or not, the building collapsed. Why? No one wanted the building to collapse. And maybe if everything was done right, circumstances could have been such that people died. I think that can, for non-believers, that can inform our compassion and our willingness to take care of people, to offset those unfair, careless things. Not careless. I don't know the word I'm looking for is, but those things that happen in life that are just meaningless. Death, injury, loss that happens. And if we realize that there is no greater plan to salvage a situation, maybe we'll be a little kinder to each other, because the world's already pretty harsh. Keeping that in mind, that it's up to us to make the world a compassionate place, not for the world to just do it passively and we're just surfing along this compassion wave. Because it's just not that. I don't see it being there. We make this place a better place, and leaving it to people don't like when we say sky daddy. I get it, but like leaving it to an all-powerful being to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, I think is not responsible. We need to be responsible for ourselves and to each other. Was it Dostoevsky or was it Tolstoy said we are responsible to all for all? And if not my responsibility to try to make the world a better place or to try to help you through something, then whose responsibility is it? You can always pass the buck to someone else and then ultimately to a metaphysical being. But why? Why pass the buck? Just grab it and do what you can. So that's maybe not, I don't know if that's related to your call, but that's what it strikes in my mind. What do you think about that, Kelly?
Well, I would say if there was like a Christian listening at this point, I think they might wonder, what is the limiting principle of Tolstoy's doctrine? How do we decide that we're going to be compassionate and accept something versus our responsibility to that person in this instance is to condemn and correct them? And without a list of behaviors and a doctrine to refer to, I feel like people may not know. That's when they struggle with LGBTQ issues. That's when they struggle with ideas that are outside their framework. And how are they going to assess new ideas? Because the entire idea was just to read the list and then use it. But how does that apply without that?
Are you talking about reading the list of moral approbations and moral probations? Are you talking about the 10 Commandments or something like that? Is that what you mean, the list?
So, biblically or whatever religious text, there's going to be a list of behaviors to condemn, and it's just based on accepting that. But, if we've moved away from that, someone is now atheist, and they don't have that anymore. They just have maybe like a reference like Tolstoy. What is the limiting principle on being accepting of others?
Oh.
Or what point is it do we decide that this behavior is wrong? And, because that's where the God of the gaps thing starts to come back in.
I hear you. I would argue that all of us have been applying our own moral framework on the world. That religious people, they point to a source book as, I don't want to say a cheat sheet, but let's say an outline of what's expected. But then they're the ones that apply the outline to the real life. People aren't buying slaves from the nations around them. Some people are, but most people are not. Most people are not treating women like second-class citizens. Yeah, at me in the comments on that one. But it's not considered something you do in the light of day anymore. It's something that people do, on the DL, if that's still a phrase that people say. But people are still applying those rules, their own personal moral standards, and how does a person take up how to improve and how to work on their moral standards? Well, I think you've got to become informed. If the Bible says one thing about gender or sex or whatever it is, maybe become informed. Not just reading books that affirm your beliefs already. Talk to people, see what their experience is like. Compassion finds root in common experience, I think, to some degree. Dan?
Well, this issue is like, if you ask any atheist on principles of morality and stuff, I think you're going to find the widest variety of answers out of any kind of question that you usually get on topics related to atheism, and how that functions. Because this was a problem for me when I first was deconstructing my own faith. I was like, not really getting, okay, what am I supposed to do now? How am I supposed to navigate life? Because my Christianity was sort of a guidebook for how I was supposed to live my life. Even though, like Johnny pointed out, that's kind of an illusion, right? Because most of us aren't following a lot of the principles actually advocated. Really, we're just following our religious denomination's point of view on what to do. But, that's kind of the point. Maybe it's like Fallout New Vegas, right? The game was rigged from the start. Like there was no real rules for us to follow anyway. And everything we came up with was just kind of our own thoughts anyway. So, like I have my own sense of particular principles that I like to follow. I try to, be respectful of any being that I deem sentient and follow with that. But like, even then, how do I like convince another person to adopt those same principles? That's a big challenge, because you just go back to this, this is ought thing. So really, I don't know if there's a big answer to it. Maybe there isn't an answer. Maybe this is something that we're never going to have to figure out. But I would rather be in a space where we're trying to figure this out and continue to learn and continue to adapt and grow and find new ways of living that's best for people, than to just throw it all to the wayside and say, well, we need to live in a society that has rules, so we're just going to adopt the Christian Bible. Because that's what a lot of like commentators kind of like appeal to, because they say, well, at least it's organized, at least this one system has rules, but like they're bad rules though. Like they obviously harm people, and harm is something that I'm going to take into account for any moral system that I'm going to follow. So
and that process that you're talking about, Dan, is something that is happening on a daily basis in our local government, our state legislatures, and on the national level and internationally. We are constantly engaged in what are the standards that we want our society to live by. It is a political process at this point. It does come down to numbers and influence in large part, but it's a process, much like science is not a series of proclamations. It is a process whereby we get to a more accurate understanding of the world outside of our heads. And I think that although there are missteps, certainly there have been missteps historically, we are moving toward a much more inclusive, or at least a more accurate understanding of what the needs of people are, and ways to help people and help society function. I mean, of course, some would say we're not anywhere close, and I think we're not anywhere close. But it's a dialogue. It's there's a lot going on with that, and so just engage in that process, like I said. And part of that is individually, locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally. But with yourself, to figure out what you want to do, how you want to view the world, engage with others so you can become informed. And then you'll maybe be able to find out where you want to go in the future. Maybe that's the guidance that you need rather than a book. You are the book. So, yeah.
Right. I think what keeps people on the edge of faith is, and keeping them from crossing over that final threshold, is the irony of being asked to develop a confidence in oneself, but to then be at the least confident point in your life. Once you leave that religion and that framework, you're going to trust yourself the least, because you would have known that you've made this terrible error or a series of errors of judgment. And now this is the time to do an inverse of trust in yourself with the least amount handy. And so I just wonder, maybe if there was some way to directly address the plot holes in the God at the Gaps argument, that maybe people could build that trust by diminishing what else is there.
I don't think you need to trust yourself necessarily. Again, like, you're right. At that point, when you're just departing religion, and Dan, you can speak to this much better than I can, because you were in it harder than I was. I was always kind of waffling my way out of it, except for a brief period when I was about 12 years old, and there was a televangelist that was really cool, but cool in quotation marks. But you don't have to think as you're leaving that you have the answers. That's the thing. You can set up a series of, like, it's almost Cartesian in a way. Set up some safety protocols so that you don't go around killing or raping or stealing or anything like that. Anything that keeps you out of the the book of the bad in society, and then engage in an in a process of educating yourself. Again, reading things that challenge your ideas and talking to people who not only talk the talk, but have to walk the walk. It's so easy. I've got friends, right, who have all these opinions. And we come back to trans issues because it's a real hot topic these days. And I'm glad that it's a hot topic because people are finally talking about this stuff, but have all these opinions about what these other people should do, how these other people should live their lives. Guaranteed that some of these friends I have are not talking to any people who are actually having to deal with these things. So whatever it might be, talking to immigrants, talking to women, talking to people who are non-binary, who, oh, I can't understand it. Well, go talk to somebody, right? Challenge your ideas. Maybe don't think you have the answers. Maybe don't think you have to have the answers. But anyway, I think that's where we're at, Kelly. I do appreciate you calling in. Call back if you've got an insight, because we want to hear it. We want to know what we should be doing, because the process never ends, right?
It's a never-ending story.
It's a never-ending story. Good talking with you, Kelly. You take care. Oh, looks like I accidentally cut him off, but it was great having him on the show. And Dan, war never changes.
Yeah, that's right. War never changes. And I'm looking forward to making more opportunities where I can quote the Fallout series again on this program. So
yeah.